All right, Samson. It was just before sundown. We were sitting on the porch when the wagon came up the road with the five of them in it and the other one on the horse behind. One of them raised his hand, but they was going on past the store without stopping. "Who's that?" Mcallum says. I can't think of his name. Rafe's twin, that one it was. "It's Bundren from down beyond New Hope," Quick says. "There's one of them Snopes horses Jules riding." "I didn't know where there was one of them horses left," Mcallum says. "I thought you folks down in there finally contrived to give them all away." "Try and get that one," Quick says. The wagon went on. "I bet an old Lon never gave it to him," I says. "No," Quick says. "He bought it from Pappy." The wagon went on. "They must not have heard about the bridge," he says. "What they're doing up here anyway," Mcallum says. "Taking a holiday since he got his wife buried, I reckon." Quick says, "Heading for town, I reckon, with Toll's bridge gone too. I wonder if they ain't heard about the bridge." "They'll have to fly then," I says. "I don't reckon there's a bridge between here and mouth of Ishitawa." They had something in the wagon, but Quick had been to the funeral 3 days ago, and we naturally never thought anything about it except that they were heading away from home mighty late and that they hadn't heard about the bridge. "You better holler at them," Mcallum says. "Darn it, the name is right on the tip of my tongue." So Quick hollered and they stopped, and he went to the wagon and told them. He come back with them. "They're going to Jefferson," he says. "The bridge at Tolls is gone too." Like we didn't know it, and his face looked funny around the nostrils, but they just sat there, Bundren and the girl and the chap on the seat, and Cash in the second one, the one folks talks about, on a plank across the tailgate, and the other one on that spotted horse. But I reckon they was used to it by then, because when I said to Cash that they'd have to pass by New Hope again and what they'd better do, he just says, "I reckon we can get there. I ain't much for meddling. Let every man run his own business to suit himself," I say. But after I talked to Rachel about them not having a regular man to fix her, and it being July and all, I went back down to the barn and tried to talk to Bundren about it. "I'd give her my promise," he says. "Her mind was set on it. I noticed how it takes a lazy man, a man that hates moving, to get set on moving once he does get started off. The same as he was set on staying still, like it ain't the moving he hates so much as the starting and the stopping. And like he would be kind of proud of whatever come up to make the moving, or he would be kind of proud of whatever come up to make the moving or the setting still look hard." He sat there on the wagon, hunched up, blinking, listening to us tell about how quick the bridge went and how high the water was. And I'd be darned if he didn't act like he was proud of it, like he had made the river rise himself. "You say it's higher than you ever seen it before," he says. "God's will be done," he says. "I reckon it won't go down much by morning either," he says. "You better stay here tonight," he says, "and get an early start for New Hope tomorrow morning." I was just sorry for them bone-gaunted mules. I told Rachel, I says, "Well, would you have had me turn them away at dark, 8 miles from home? What else could I do?" I says. "It won't be but one night, and they'll keep it in the barn, and they'll surely get started by daylight." And so I says, "You stay here tonight, and early morning tomorrow you can go back to New Hope. I got tools enough, and the boys can go on right after supper and have it dug and ready if they want." And then I found that girl watching me. If her eyes had been pistols, I wouldn't be talking now. I'd be dog if they didn't blaze at me. And so when I went down to the barn and come up on them, her talking so she never noticed when I come up. "You promised her," she says. "She wouldn't go until you promised. She thought she could depend on you. If you don't do it, it will be a curse on you." "Can no man say I don't aim to keep my word?" Bundren says. "My heart is open to a man. I don't care where your heart is," she says. She was whispering, kind of talking fast. "You promised her. You got to. You." Then she seen me and quit standing there. If they'd been pistols, I wouldn't be talking now. So when I talked to him about it, he says, "I'd give her my promise. Her mind is set on it. But seems to me she'd rather have her ma buried close by so she could. It's Addie I'd give the promise to," he says. "Her mind is set on it." So I told him to drive it in the barn because it was threatening rain again and that supper was about ready, only they didn't want to come in. "I thank you," Bundren says. "We wouldn't discommode you. We got a little something in the basket we can make out." "Well," I says, "since you are so particular about your women folks, I am too. And when folks stops with us at mealtime and won't come to the table, my wife takes it as an insult." So the girl went on to the kitchen to help Rachel, and then Jewel come to me. "Show," I says. "Help yourself out in the loft. Feed him when you bait the mules. I'd rather pay you for him," he says. "What for?" I says. "I wouldn't begrudge no man a bait for his horse." So Jewel's a horse. So the girl went on to the kitchen to help Rachel, and then Jewel come to me. "Show," I says. "Help yourself out in the loft. Feed him when you bait the mules." Or maybe Jewel's on the horse. I'd rather pay you for him, he says. What for? I says, I wouldn't begrudge no man a bait for his horse. I'd rather pay you, he says. I thought he said extra. He says, I thought he said extra. Extra for what? I says. Won't he eat hay and corn? Extra feed, he says. I feed him a little extra and I don't want him beholden to no man. You can't buy no feed from me, boy, I says. And if he can't eat that loft clean, I'll help you load the barn onto the wagon in the morning. He ain't never been beholden to no man, he says. I'd rather pay you for it. And if I had my rathers, you wouldn't be here at all, I wanted to say. But I just says, then it's high time he commenced. You can't buy no food from me. When Rachel put supper on, her and the girl went and fixed some beds, but wouldn't any of them come in. She's been dead long enough to get over that sort of foolishness, I says. But I got just as much respect for the dead as ever man, but you've got to respect the dead themselves. And a woman that's been dead in a box 4 days, the best way to respect her is to get her into the ground as quick as you can, but they wouldn't do it. It wouldn't be right, Bundren says. Of course, if the boy wants to go to bed, I reckon I could set up with her. I don't begrudge her it. So when I went back down there, they were squatting on the ground around the wagon, all of them. Let that chap come to the house and get some sleep anyway, I says, and you better come too, I says to the girl. I was aiming to interfere with him, and I surely hadn't done nothing to her that I knowed. He's done already asleep, Bundren says. They had done put him to bed in the trough in an empty stall. Well, you come on then, I says to her. Be still, she never said nothing. But still, she never said nothing. They just squatted there. You couldn't hardly see them. How about you boys, he says. You got a full day tomorrow after a while, Cash says. I thank you. We can make out. We wouldn't be beholden, Bundren says. I thank you kindly. I think Anse, that's Anse Bundren. He calls him Bundren out of respect, you know. So I left them squatting there. I reckon after 4 days they was used to it, but Rachel wasn't. It's a outrage, she says. A outrage. Rachel's his wife. What could he had done, I says. He give her his promised word. Who's talking about him? She says. Who cares about him? She says, crying. I just wish that you and him and all the men in the world that torture us alive and flout us dead. There's that word, flout. Flout was dead, dragging us up and down the country. Now, I says, you're upset. Don't you touch me, she says. Don't you touch me. A man can't tell nothing about them. I live with the same one 15 years, and I've been darned if I can. I imagine a lot of things coming up between us. But I'd be darned if I ever thought it would be a body 4 days dead and that a woman. But they make life hard and they're not taking it as it comes like a man does. So I lay there hearing it commence to rain, thinking about them down there squatting around the wagon and the rain on the roof, and thinking about Rachel crying there until after a while it was like I could still hear her crying even after she was asleep, and smiling it even when I know it. I couldn't decide even then whether I could or not, or if it wasn't just knowing it was what it was. So next morning I never went down there. I heard them hitching up, and then when I knowed they must be about ready to take out, I went out the front and went down the road toward the bridge until I heard the wagon come out of the lot and go back toward New Hope. And then when I come back to the house, Rachel jumped on me because I wasn't there to make them come in to breakfast. You can't tell about them. Just about 10, or just about when you decide they mean one thing. I'd be darned if you not only haven't got to change your mind, like as not, you got to take a raw hiding for thinking they meant it. But it's still like I could smell it. It was still like I could smell it. And so I decided then that it wasn't smelling it, but it was just knowing it was there, like you will get full now and then. But when I went to the barn, I knew different. When I walked into the hallway, I saw something. It kind of hunkered up when I come in, and I thought at first it was one of them got left. Then I saw what it was. It was a buzzard. It looked around and saw me and went on down the hall, spraddle-legged, with its wings kind of hunkered out, watching me first over one shoulder and then over the other like a old bald-headed man. When it got outdoors, it began to fly. It had to fly a long time before it ever got up into the air with it thick and heavy and full of rain like it was. If they was bent on going to Jefferson, I reckon they could have gone around up by Mount Vernon like Mcallum did. He'll get home about day after tomorrow horseback, then they just be 18 miles from town. But maybe this bridge being gone too has learned him the Lord's sense and judgment. That Mcallum, he's been trading with me off and on for 12 years. I've known him from a boy up. Known his name as well as I do my own, but darn if I can't say it. Alright, that was the end of yeah, that was I want to get the name. Samson? Yeah, that was Samson. Oh yeah.